funny. We're good? All right. Hello, everybody. Hey, welcome. Is it like super loud or is it just me? It's good? It's super loud? It's the just right amount of loud? Yeah? All right. Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to the very first Drupal NYC Meetup of 2018. Happy New Year, everybody. Yay! Wow, that was actually pretty good. That sounded like a thing. Okay, my name is Alex Ross. I will be your MC this evening, and we're gonna get the party started. Here we go. Okay, first a couple quick housekeeping items. If you have a device that makes noise, please make sure that it's not going to make noise during the course of the evening. Please use a mic to ask questions at any point during the evening. We will have people running around with mics, so just throw your hand up in the air. We just want to make sure everybody can hear you. For those of you who are speaking, if for some reason a question gets asked without a mic, please repeat the question. And we also want to make sure we do record these audibly. We record the slides with that. So we want to make sure that all the questions are hearable, listenable, a part of the recordings that we do and we put up on YouTube. So please make sure you use the mics. Restrooms, we have some of those. Yay! Women's rooms are the middle of the stage left hallway, all the way down on your, or kind of halfway down on your right. The men's rooms are the stage right hallway, halfway down on your left, and we do have gender neutral restrooms on the stage right hallway on the right. So use whatever restrooms you need to use, but that's where you find them. Wi-Fi information is on the bottom of every one of these slides. Unfortunately, you have to like register for an account like you're at a cheap hotel. Sorry, but there you go. All right, before we get to the agenda, I'm going to tell a really, really quick anecdote. My name is Alex Ross. I work here at NBC, and we've been going through some like reorg stuff, and I have a new boss now, and I told my little 5-year-old that I have a new boss, and he looked at me dead in the eye, and he goes, "I thought Drupal was your boss." Which is not altogether false, but it's not exactly true either, and yeah, anyway. Okay. Announcements, I'm doing those now, so we're right on schedule. Talks, we're going to have a bunch of those. Awesome. Closing remarks, I'll do those later. And then Afterparty, we do have an Afterparty. We'll talk about it more, but it's downstairs at Bill's Bar and Burger. Good times. Here we go. Talks, we have 3 great talks today. The first one is going to be the first in a series of talks. I think it's a 64-part series. Scott, can you confirm it's a 64-part series? 62-part series. But no, this is going to be the first in a series of several. I don't know what the number is yet. But Scott and Robert are going to be talking about securing your Drupal server, really, your Drupal site on your servers. John Pugh is going to be talking to us about Provision 4.x, giving us a sneak peek. And then Doug McCabe, who I saw over there in the corner, is going to be talking about could Drupal hold the key that allows workers to manage, maybe even embrace, the digital transformation upending all industries? ? Let's find out. That's very ambitious. Let's find out. Is it just that one screen that's blinking, or all of them blinking? Because I'm looking at that. No, it's just that one. I'll look at that one. Okay. Your organizers for this evening and all of these meetups, their pictures and names are up there. Come up and say hi to everybody, to the organizers. We like to put this slide up to make sure that you know who to go to if you have suggestions or questions or comments or concerns. If you have anything bad to say, then tell it to someone else. No, if you have any constructive criticism, let us know. We very much do value the feedback, so we can try and make these events as interesting and entertaining and useful as we possibly can. So there are your organizers. Venue, food, and drink sponsored by NBC Universal. Yay! Woo! NBC. Okay. After party sponsored by Fastly. Yay! Fastly. All right. Thank you to our friends at Fastly and NBC Universal. Photos and hashtags. Please take photos. Make your friends jealous that they are not here. If you do take photos, you can upload them on meetup.com/Drupal NYC, to Twitter, to Instagram, to whatever your favorite social media is. We ask that you use the hashtag Drupal NYC so that everybody can be jealous that they weren't here and you were. Okay. Upcoming events. Drupal Camp, New Jersey. Hold on, I think I have a note on this one. And Face ID. There we go. Okay, here we go. Drupal Camp, New Jersey. It's coming up. I know that. It's going to be, we'll talk more about that. No, we don't have for New Jersey, just for New York City. Sorry. So Drupal Camp New Jersey coming up February 3rd, drupalcampnj.org. They usually have it down by Princeton. I'm pretty sure that that's where they're having it again this year. So if anybody feels like taking a Jersey Transit ride south, you should definitely check that out. Drupal Camp NYC, we'll talk more about that in one slide. But that's coming up in the middle of March, March 17th. And then Sand Camp. Where is Sand Camp? Who knows? San Diego? That's just too on the nose, really. It should be in like Phoenix, where there's desert. Anyway, no, nothing. Some of my jokes just don't land at all. You can write that one down. That one did not land. Okay. All right, so here we go. Updates on Drupal Camp NYC. So, first off, this is the 12th year of Drupal Camp NYC. That's a lot of years, and it's grown and morphed and evolved. It's a really great event. It is an unconference format. For those of you who are not familiar with an unconference format, the basic idea is that when you show up at the conference in the morning, you have some ideas of something that you either are really interested in talking about, or something that you are or something that you are very interested in learning about. Everybody gets there at 9 in the morning. There's usually bagels or some such breakfast type activity. And then everybody gets together and says, I want to do a session on views. And somebody says, yeah, I'd really like to hear a session on views. And someone else says, I'd really like to have a gathering of everybody from the nonprofit space. And let's talk about how they're using Drupal. Yeah, we're from the nonprofit space. And cards go up. Sticky notes go up on a board, rooms get filled up, and then the conference is had. So everything that goes on at the conference is really put together by the people at the conference right there. It takes a half an hour, 45 minutes to set that all up, and it's a lot of fun. And then you have a conference that you know that you're going to be interested in, and there's going to be good stuff. If you've never done an unconference before, it's really interesting just on the very face of the kind of conference format. But the Drupal Camp NYC unconference conference has been going on for a long time, and they've really done a great job with it. It is Saturday, March 17th. It is at John Jay College on the west side, and I think that's it. Oh, we're looking for corporate sponsors, and I know they're also looking for volunteers to help with, organize. Oh, see, there it is. They're looking for volunteers to help organize and help with day of, things of that nature. So if you have any interest at all, please use the contact on meetup.com. There's a Slack channel, which we'll have a slide for in 2 seconds. You can come talk to any of the organizers on the Slack channel, and we will point you in the right direction and get you to the right person. If anyone knows Joe Bahana, he's usually the one that's organizing, or he will point you to the right person. It's a great event, so really mark your calendars. Yes? What time? It's usually an all-day event. I can't tell you the precise time, but it is typically, in the past, it's been like a 9 to 5 type event, and then everyone kind of goes out afterwards to go, do something socially. Good. Okay. Interested in speaking. So in this case, really we're talking about for this event, but really in any of these events that we're talking about that Drupal NYC puts on, we are always looking for good speakers. We're always looking for interesting speakers. We're always looking for people that have interesting topics to talk about. The crazy project that you've been working on for the last 6 months, someone else in the room would probably love to hear about it. We're always looking for somebody to talk about that project or that interesting problem that they're solving or that new piece of software that they're writing or that new service that they're, figuring out, or that new startup that they're trying to put together, or that new nonprofit, or whatever it is that is kind of like filling your brain. Other people would love to hear about it, and we would love to have you come up and talk about it, obviously in kind of like a Drupal-y related, Drupal umbrella type lens. But we do talks that are of various lengths and types, so lightning talks. These are typically 5, maybe 10-minute talks. People have given these like, I had a problem this morning. I figured out how to do this one thing, and it took me forever to figure it out, but it was fascinating once I figured out what was going on. Here's what my problem was, here's what I did, and that's the end of the talk. Other people have done lightning talks that have been like, here's a great module that I just learned about that's awesome, and here's why it's awesome. Things of that nature. So if you've got something good, or here's some new technology that I think could really help the Drupal community, some tool that I'm using, some way of leveraging, I don't know. Anyway, You get the idea. We also have some more in-depth talks. The talks that we're going to have tonight are more on that level of in-depth. These are typically like 20, 25-minute talks. They get more, in-depth into a topic. Shocking, I know. So we are always looking for people who are interested in giving those as well. And we're also looking for people who are looking, for a talk on a specific topic. If the thing that you are most interested in is, the views module for some reason, right? Cool, we can probably find someone who can give an interesting talk on the views module. So if there's something really particular that you're looking for, tell us that too. That helps us as we're trying to track down people to give talks. Questions, comments, concerns, jokes, poems? No? Excellent. Okay. Hit us up on Slack or on drupal.nyc/suggest if you have a talk that you would like to give or hear. All right. Here we go. Who's hiring? That's my 5-year-old who asked me if Drupal is my boss. Yeah. Raise your hand if you are here because you're hiring, or in general hiring, even if that's not why you're here. Okay. Real quick. Hold on. Here we go. What is the name of your company, and what is the role you are hiring for?
I wasn't expecting this,
wow.
but I work for Live It Media, and we are a publishing company, fashion magazine, and we're looking in for front-end developers.
Awesome. Here we go. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I work at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. We're currently looking for 2 roles. These are contract roles, one for DevOps and one for front end. If you're interested, please let me know.
All right, one more hand went up somewhere. I don't remember where, but it did.
I'm Frank Harry at Vimeo. We're looking for not Drupal engineers specifically, but a lot of front-end React and PHP engineers, so hit me up if you're interested. Symfony as well is a good thing.
All right, anyone else? Oh, one more. Go ahead.
I'm Sophie. I'm Human Resources Manager in shopping2shop.com, and we're looking for some web designer.
Some designers. Okay. All right. If anybody in the room just heard something that went, you should go find the person that made you go, Okay. Here we go. Let's keep going. Introductions. All right. Everybody in the room, take 5 minutes and say hello to the person on your left or right who you've never met before. And then I will interrupt you at the most awkward point in the discussion. All right, we're going to get started with our first talk, a first in a series of securing Drupal and your server. Scott Walpole. Is Robert here? There he is. Hey, Robert. All right, so here we go. I have an intro. Scott is a lifelong entrepreneur. He has been involved in computing since the days of Western Union teletypes. He joined the Drupal community in 2009 and has been managing projects for various clients. Recently, he joined forces with Robert to form Public CTO, which offers technical expertise for companies that do not have their own tech team. And Robert has worked in financial tech at Wall Street, in fintech at Wall Street. In 2008, he created a startup for hosting high-performance computing. As cloud computing became dominated by a few companies, he shifted gears. Currently, he's working with Scott. There we go. At Public CTO, a firm that is vendor agnostic and helps companies with technology. Scott and Robert, go for it. Are you plugged in? You're not plugged in. You are plugged in?
Yep.
Oh, we didn't switch the thing.
Switch.
We're going to switch the thing. So this building was built in 1930. Okay. Go ahead.
This one works.
Thank you. While Scott gets the first slide up, the purpose of this is, of course, as everybody knows, every day you hear about a site being hacked or some other thing going on with the site, or maybe the performance is poor, or you even try to log into a site and you get the little spinning wheel for more time than you think should be there, and then of course that's lost business. So I finally told Scott, we kind of got to bring this up at the meeting. It's never really talked about. We're going to try to keep it as Drupalese as possible and as webby as possible, so we're not going to dive really deep down, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask us. Also, we're going to need your feedback as to what we could do next, because we volunteered to do a series on these because it is so important nowadays. And this way, you get your site secured, you increase the performance, you keep your users happy, and you increase your bonus. You always got to think about your bonus in this.
Now, depending on your position in your company, you might be the person responsible for Drupal, and the site goes down. Your boss doesn't know from servers or anything else. If the Drupal's down, it's your fault. Get it up. And when you do your job correctly, no one cares because no one sees it's done correctly. It's when you don't do things. Now, just coincidentally, a bit of synchronicity, I got an email about EC2s being rebooted tomorrow. I've been telling my client for 6 months now we need to update the servers. They don't like to do it because it's money they spend that they don't really see as anything. They don't realize it is a profit center having a server that functions because nothing's more expensive than your server going down. And so we're trying to be a wide range of what we're talking about. But once again, we need to know what you need to speak about because we have people who run single sites to people who run large systems. The larger systems, they probably will know about server security, but not everyone knows everything there is. And we could probably speak for 6 hours on security alone. So the user experience is obviously if you have to be able to log on the server and see the sites or use your app. And if it doesn't perform well or is slow and sluggish, it could be caused by a lot of functionality. And when you get into all the other problems, it could cause it. But if your site's not functioning properly, the user experience is wrong. That's a good way to go to your senior people and explain to them why it's important to spend time and money on securing your server, updating the systems, because you tell them the user experience won't be happy. Robert?
Here we dug up our good thought for the day, and this is back from before the internet, if you can believe there was a before the internet. And some of you may have heard of this book. There was a book written on how to wage war, and this was one of the quotes from it. To ensure that your whole host may withstand the brunt of the enemy's attack and remain unshaken, this is effected by maneuvers, direct and indirect. So we're going to talk about some of these direct and indirect methods of securing your server. So just when you thought the internet was new, here we are going back in time.
And 2 other quotes. Every battle is won before it's fought. So if you're preemptive about fixing your server, you're going to beat the bad people before they get in there. And the other quote is the victorious warriors win first, then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first, then seek to win. If you're trying to be reactive, you've lost the war. Except if you're using React Native, of course.
So here we have, important things that everybody knows. Keep your site up to date. But what does that mean? Well, your core. Drupal core is important. And a lot of you, I know you've signed up for the email alert, so you're very up to date on it. But also the plugins. And don't forget the OS. And one thing that you have to worry about with plugins is every once in a while, a very popular plugin goes stale. And there have been cases of the plugins then redirected for bad things. So always keep up with your plugins, keep up with what's going on in the world. And we've got a couple websites up here where you can check, periodically to see what's going on in the universe. Because you want to be informed. Because there's nothing worse than saying, well, gee, I'm okay, and then finding out in the morning, oh, here's shell shock. Or, as I just read, it was yesterday, there's a serious thing with PHP My Admin, and they're telling everybody update as soon as possible. And of course, how soon should you update? Everybody knows that it's a pain to update. So you sort of have to plan ahead for that to say, okay, if something really comes out as important, how can I update it quick? Because remember, the internet speed runs faster than 9 to 5. So you may hear about an update at 6 o'clock in the evening and say, well, I'll get it on Monday, but that may be too late. So what is the process you have? And we may even talk about that in later slides about how you can either automate this or make it less painful so you can get updates in a timely manner.
Now, as Robert mentioned, it's not 9 to 5. Do you know most attacks actually occur in the after hours? And this past week is probably the most notorious time for attacks because people are at parties, the skeleton crews. We actually had an attack on our NOC a few years ago at this time of year. It was like thousands and thousands of attacks per minute. Luckily, we survived. No one got through. Most of it was WordPress exploits. And we kind of know how we feel about WordPress. By the way, how many people here actually monitor security of the Drupal site and go to these 3 URLs, the appropriate URLs, and check out, see which modules have gone stale and which ones have to be updated? Who does that on a regular basis, like once a week? Raise your hand. Okay, the rest of you, you're waiting for your sites to be hacked, I guess. Okay.
Servers. You don't think about them too much. But here again is some URLs to check out to get what's latest in the server universe. The first one only deals with issues, and they always put a name. In fact, a couple years ago, they had to increase the number of digits because of the number per year. And this year is last year, 2017, was the highest number of CVE entries ever. And the last one listed down there was a report that Verizon put out that generalizes all the issues going on in the universe. It's a good read. It takes a while. So when you have a chance, look it up, read it. Hopefully 2018 they'll come up with another report. But it really lets you know about the severity, what's changing from a very high level business point of view. Of course, it's internet centric, so it doesn't really talk about websites in general, but it does talk about data links, SQL security, the whole sheboygan, if you will.
Don't forget, as connectivity grows around the world, the threats go exponentially. It's more and more people going in, more ankle biters thinking with script kiddies who download the software. They don't know what they're doing. They run it, they think it's funny. They don't realize the damage they can do.
Types of intrusions. Now this is just a general list, but we thought we'd bring this up. The first one is deface the sites. And this is your script kiddies looking for bragging rights. It's a nuisance. Sometimes it's harmless, but you never know what's going to happen out there. The second one is more serious, steal the data. Well, they're selling it. And we all know all the big names lately. And many of them, they even blame the programmer. Can you believe that? It's a big major firm. What do? They blame a programmer. They also can use your site as a zombie. And this is the case of question.
NBC is hosting us. So in the case of the Sony attack, which was quite dramatic, and they were state agents, would your security have been able to prevent that? Because that was a rather dramatic attack on Sony. I'm sure you remember that.
Yes. Interesting question. And disclaimer, there is nothing as secure as a server that's locked in concrete and thrown in the ocean. Now that said, there are many, many business best practices that you can do. But as you're well aware of, every day they're coming out with changes to software. Like I just mentioned, PHP has an issue, and they're telling you update now. And of course, they rate them by levels of severity. So sometimes you can wait a little bit. Other times it's, boy, you better get it done right away. So to answer your question very directly, there's business best practices you can follow, keep your site updated, and watch what's going on. It's about all we can do at this time. In that case, there's really no way to know. And as Scott mentioned, we've seen some of these sites come into the stuff we monitor and manage, and it's all different. And some of it is just the same thing over and over and over again. It's like, go away already. We've seen this. And other ones, every day it's something new. In fact, we should have an example of something I just saw the other day that was brand new to me. So the whole universe is changing. It's basically an arms race, which is why we had on the first slide the old ancient Oriental wisdom to live by. You just gotta, you have to be proactive as best you can. It's the best you can do. Any other question?
Now, these days, one of the things you have to worry about, as we learned at when we went to the Amazon event, is that sometimes they're using sites to do bit mine. And so on the Amazon site, yes, they suddenly got a bill through the roof on a server that was really not supposed to do much. someone had gone in there, set up a bit mining operation, turned out to be an internal person, but the Amazon people are saying that's happening more and more now, so that's theft of your assets. You don't see anything wrong with your website, doesn't slow anything down because they're smart enough to do it at night when things are quiet, yet who gets stuck with the bill? You get stuck with the bill. And when the first hack sites I ever discovered is when I get a phishing email, I backtraced into what it was. It turned out to be an IT firm in the Midwest, and they were kind of embarrassed because they're an IT security firm, and the website got hacked. And why? Because they were using an old system. They figured out it's my brochure website. What could happen to it? Now, these are the logs. Tell me about logs.
Okay, these are the logs. We just threw some sample ones up, but definitely if you have access, review your logs, check your Apache logs, your Nginx, your OS messages, the security log, and you'll definitely find a lot of interesting stuff in there. And I just mentioned that we had an interesting one, and this is the one down here. It says SSH-2.-go. Why would anybody try to go into your port 80 and run an SSH server? It's new. Apparently, there's a login out there written in Go, and it runs on the port 80, and people are using it. And there's a hack out for it already. And we mentioned PHP earlier, and here the first couple on the screen are people just phishing for PHP MyAdmin ports. And another one down here that's another interesting one. It's somebody doing research. Why do they want to do research on my server? And you get this stuff. And this is why I mentioned in the beginning is using security for performance. If you start seeing thousands of attempts in your logs to just phish information, well, they're stealing your resources. They're causing contention for your users. You don't want this. You want to fight back, if you will. And there's many things you can do, and some things you can't do. But at least if you're aware of that it's out there, you have a chance to, put your finger on it and stop it. So this is why we put the logs up. Check your logs. I know many of you may or may not have automated scanning of your logs. It's very important, but at least look at them every once in a while. You'll never know what you're going to find in there.
Yeah, the server logs are really the geekiest thing, but they're also really the vital part, the vital signs of your server. It's no difference when you go to the doctor and he takes your pulse and listens to your breathing, everything else. That's what tells you what's wrong with your server more than anything else. And logs have to be maintained. I've seen servers where the logs have gone up to the gigabyte range, and then the server goes crashing down because there's no more space left, because no one ever thought to rotate them. No one thought to search them or do anything else. How many people have companies I work with or clients where the attitude is, I bought the server, or I got the server set up 4 or 5 years ago, and they haven't done anything since then? How many people have encountered that? Okay. So on this slide, Robert, we have something about the search engines to detect issues.
Okay, not only can you do passive check on your logs, here's something that you can also check on your source code. And this is one that came out a few years ago, the Get Mama. Some of you may remember that issue that came out, where you could just do a find through your PHP files and do a grep and see if you find the word Get Mama. And you'd be surprised what shows up. And another one was they were doing some hex coding. And normally in your PHP code, you wouldn't have all the hex code. So you can look for the base 64 decode and see what's in there, because that was another popular way to pollute your site. And it really wouldn't affect the site per se, but it would show up in all the search engines, and they could actually do it to show up on certain browsers. And you could find it through the base 64 decode. And since Google and several others are always scanning our sites, you can also use them as a resource to see what's going on with your site. So here was one we ran a couple years ago where you put in site, your URL, and then the little script code there, and you put in the code you're looking for, and you can see if Google has any hits. And it'll tell you every web page that you had that hit on. So then you know, I got to go to those web pages and clean it up. So you can use Google to your advantage other than people scanning your sites with Google.
And you can also use this, if you know how to do it, to set up the search, go through your logs and go through to scan your server to find malicious code so you can fix that before it becomes a problem. Because if it's on Google, it's already a problem.
Okay, we talked about some of the reasons you want to secure your site. So we kind of wanted to come up with some real detail here. Everybody uses HTTPS, right? Excellent. Well, as soon as you get a server, if you actually look at how Apache set up, it's a very generic setup. So one of the first things I always look to do is set it up to make sure that, one, we're not using SSL anymore. The secure socket layers has protocol weaknesses. So everybody should be using TLS, the transport layer security. So you should put that in there where you actually specify to use TLS and not SSL. And the next slide, which is a little more complicated, you tell it to honor your security level. You tell it which protocols you want to use, and you give it the cipher suite. Now this is a long stream, but if you notice, the MD5 and the null, they're all at the end and turned off, and the ones at the front are actually the higher level securities that also give you the forward security. Some people call it perfect forward security, but who knows? And you can also test your website and translate that into English. Next screen.
Which is here.
You can pump it through OpenSSL and it actually translates it for you. So if you take that stream of characters and say OpenSSL-V, it'll translate it into all the relevant information.
Oh, sorry, anything more on that slide, or?
Oh, just one other thing. You can also test to make sure you're not using SSL through, again, SSL. It's a nice command line thing. You just key in OpenSSL, SSL-client, -SSL3, connect to your IP and port, and if it comes back negative, you're in. If it comes back positive, change it.
So, I just want to, one thing I have a couple of my students from the CWA here, and one thing I always told them, this profession is a gateway learning. You learn more and more, and there's more you have to learn. In closing, I'll just say thanks to Flat Icon and FreePick. It's two sites. You can get a lot of vector graphics you can put on your site or into your presentations. And part of the thing is, if I use it for free, I give them credit, and that's what I did. And that's us. And come speak to us if you have any questions. And let us know what other things you want to learn about. Because really, like the unconference, it's what you want to learn, not what we think you want to learn. We're done. Thank you.
All right. Woo! Does anybody have any questions? We have a question.
You mentioned the Cipher Security Suites. I was wondering if you had any opinions on the Mozilla Cipher Security Generator and how the generated configurations are, and whether you wanted to recommend that to other people.
It works. But at this point in time, depending on your level of OpenSSL, your level of Apache, etc., there's a pretty standard set that you can use. Again, you're really just cutting out the older, lower grade ciphers such as the MD5, the export ciphers, etc., and you want to use the higher levels. If you actually click on the little icon on your browser, you can actually bring it up and see what the websites are actually using, and you'll find that most of them are using the EDCH 128-bit, 256-bit TLS nowadays. If that answered your question? Well, but you can see that. You can see what everybody else is using. And the Mozilla, again, it does work, but there is really kind of a sort of a recommended set you can use, which is what we put on the slide. It has the higher level of security, and it also has the downgrade for older browsers. Because remember, your site can enforce security, but if the browser coming in doesn't use it, well, you know, if they got DOS-based Windows 3 browser, you know, it's not going to work.
And there's still DOS systems out there, actually.
What's the level of difficulty for migrating from moving from SSL to TLS in general?
It's just a configuration change. It's that easy. But again, just remember that not every user in the internet universe has an up-to-date browser that can handle all of it. So that's why I did mention you have to throw some in for downgrade purposes. You know, we're really not running government top secret sites, but we do want secure sites.
All right, one more question.
Hi, thanks for the talk. So you mentioned to check the logs for any, suspicious activity. So what are, if in case someone, finds one of those, harmful scripts, what are the best way to, to fix that? And what is like a surefire way to, mitigate or prevent that from happening again?
Well, I'll get my 2 cents and then get Robert's 2 cents. My favorite tool is Google. Because if it's happening on my server, chances are it happens somewhere else. So if you're not really a guru of security in the server logs, turn to Google and play around with that, and you get an idea what's going on. But for me, it's patching your server, being up to date, and don't forget, besides your server, there are switches and other things involved that you may or may not have control over. You have to be aware how those work. You can also look for patterns, what people are doing. So you saw one person probing. If you see someone probing from site to site on your server, the IP address to different websites, you know it's probably someone up to no good. Robert?
The easiest way is put something in your HT access, and it's as Scott mentioned, try to get some information on it, which is why we put up the one slide with all the URLs in it, where you can sort of be up to date on what's going on. Because a lot of times what happens is this stuff is published, and over the next 2 days, all of a sudden you start seeing it. It's like, what, these people just wait for it? It's crazy sometimes. So to directly answer your question, it really depends on what you're running, what your vulnerability really is, and if it's something that requires a software change, that's 90% of it most of the time.
All right, thank you very much, guys. Woo! So while John comes on up and plugs in, a quick PSA. I got a tweet that the New York City schools will be closed tomorrow for a snow event. So use that information to get either really pissed off or really excited, depending on your point of view. My wife told my son, and my son was like, but I like school. Aww. He's only in kindergarten. He doesn't know yet. He'll know. He'll learn. All right, so John is going to do a talk on Provision 4.x, a developer sneak peek. John is the man, the myth, the legend, and that is his intro. No. John Pugh is an independent Drupal consultant and code artist. It's kind of like a sandwich artist from Subway. Is that where that's good? I like that. His company, ThinkDrop, is focused on business app design, DevOps support, and content strategy in New York City. He is an Aegir maintainer. For those of you who don't know, John can tell you all about Aegir. And he created DevShop, an open source Drupal development platform. He can tell you all about that too. I'm going to stall real quick while John gets his computer all set up. So this building was built in 1930. Okay. All right. You good?
Yes.
All right. John, everybody. John Pugh.
Wow, thanks for coming out. It's really cold. This is a big crowd. I wasn't expecting this many people. Okay. This isn't really building Drupal, but it's important stuff. So, long story. Huh? I'll get closer to the mic so I don't have to yell. Thanks, Frank. Like he said, this is me. I'm not going to go over that again. The point of this thing and the point of all the things that I work on are just try to make things simpler. It's very, very hard to launch websites even if you know how to do it, it's still a pain. You know, you may have your scripts ready, but there's plenty of documentation on how to do it, though. You can go to Drupal.org and find out right away and learn really quickly how easy it is to get Drupal up and running. There's only these 4 steps, and then if that one's too long, you can read the quick install, which is really short. You can spend, you know, it's easy stuff. Like, you just, come on. Everybody should know this stuff. And no, we want to know how to click and build a website and forget about all this DevOps stuff, right? So, like I said, the problem is running websites on your own computer is too hard. No matter what provisioner you use, you still have to manage your own metadata. That's a technical statement, right? But provisioner means like Ansible or Chef or Puppet or any of these things your DevOps people and systems people will tell you that they use to provision their servers. Like, they're still storing somewhere. What Git repo am I pulling from? Where should those files go? All that stuff. So they still have to manage that somehow. And most of these provisioning tools are written in languages other than PHP, which is okay. But there's way too many ways to run Drupal. You can tell from my very scientific graph that I created here. But it's true. Go look up how many ways there are to launch Drupal. So in 2007, this started out as a historic talk, right? I said, oh, 10 years of hosting Drupal, because this Ager thing just hit 10 years of commits. No one really knows when it started, but the first actual recorded commit was on December 7, 2007. And some people were like, man, we want to be able to host Drupal really easy because this Drupal thing is amazing. Even 10 years ago, it was really impressive. And they were like, what if we could use Drupal to manage our Drupal sites? And they did it. And they created this company called Bright, which you can only find on the archive if you know the domain. And I looked for it, so I did. But they were really like the earliest kind of Drupal as a SaaS like hosting service trying to automate things. And who knows what happened? One thing led to another. They were acquired and transferred to other people. But the point is the source code for that platform they built became open source. Just like Drupal became open source and everyone started using it, this thing is just Drupal modules, and they open source that so that we could click and say add a site, type in the domain name, and it runs all the scripts in the backend needed to actually turn the site on. This is the UI, and it's been the UI since about 2007. Hostmaster is a component of that. It's a Drupal distribution, so all of that stuff is Drupal code that you saw. It's Drupal nodes and fields and templates and all of those things, so it's really familiar to you, and you can add modules to it to do all the extra things that Drupal can do. Hosting is the name of the module itself, and provision is the name of these drush commands that run on the back end. You may not know what drush is, so that's a shell tool for Drupal. It's a Drupal shell. And you can type in drush cache clear, for example, and you don't have to click through all the pages to hit the button. You just type in drush cache clear, it does all the things. So they extended that to make commands like provision verify and provision install so that it would actually spin up all the configuration needed to run your site. Apache configs and database configs, and create a database automatically, set all the files, everything in that instructions list. Ager does automatically for you every time. A little bit of history graph. So the commits do go back that far. It's intense sometimes to dig in there. Most of mine are like all at the end. You can see the little spike here because I'm doing crazy on this new project. This is the original commit. Not terribly interesting, but it was only 11 files and 1,300 lines. This is the provision inc file as it stands today. So git blame on GitHub is a really handy tool if anybody has an old project. Very useful to find that blame button, and you can figure out line by line who did what. And so you can see 10 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, really, really legacy stuff. And that's how it worked in 2007. Put all these things together, and they were able to build a Drupal hosting company and also release it to open source. So in 2018, what are we going to do? We do the same thing right now, basically. It's basically the same packages. It's Drupal 7 front end. It's a drush package. It's Drupal modules. It's really pretty. It's getting old and showing its age. I'm not going to go through every detail, but like it's got a long and storied history. The community survived somehow throughout all these things. It's older than Drupal 6. So we are still doing things with it, right? So what's next is that the system needs an overhaul. Clearly, there's a lot of smart people involved, and they have many different ideas on how it should go or what it should do. So the team talked together and figured out that if we break it up into segments, we can kind of tackle things. Helmo, Herman van Rink, is kind of in the current branch maintainer, so he puts out the releases of Ager 3, which is stable right now for hosting tons of Drupal sites. NASA has like 500 Drupal sites running on this. I took over what we're calling the 4.x, which is what I'm working on now. We're going to show. And then Christopher Gervais is working on a totally brand new next generation thing that has no common upstream at all to Ager that we're calling 5.x. And so we broke it up like this so we can keep developing the stable version, work on kind of the current gen, next gen thing on Ager 4, and then Chris is looking at the long term with 5. So yeah, it is a little confusing, but this is all work in progress, and we're trying to get through it as quick as possible. So yeah, like I said, Ager 4 may or may not be a thing. I'm working on provision 4. I care most right now about the back end, this command line interface, which isn't just for hosting on your cloud servers, but this should be easy enough to run on your Mac laptop. So I'm trying to make this thing easy enough so you're brand new to Drupal, a designer, whatever, you don't know how to program, you can just call these little commands and it'll spin up your Drupal site on any computer. Once that's stable and works, there's a lot of features that the main Ager thing uses because it's a huge multi-site hosting machine. Then we can kind of think about bringing the Ager front end into 4.x fully. If we do get there, I'm going to bring in all these extra tools that we built with like DevShop and this CI stuff in Drupal that we bring it all into the native code base. Again, details don't really matter, but this is way down the road. You know, I'm focusing on the back end CLI first. But hopefully, I have a little running website Drupal on my Mac right now. So in terms of working MVP of turning a Drupal site on your laptop, this is going to be something I put out as like an alpha in the next few months. Like I explained before with 5, it's a totally new rewrite that he's doing. I'm not involved in that 5.x, but you can check it out. But you really have to know a lot about it because I haven't even run it yet, so it's intense stuff. But with 4.x, we're going to back it up a bit. In September, Drush announced they're not going to support things the way they used to support them. I'm not going to get into details, but basically, the command line thing is like becoming a module. You want to put it right in there with your site, so it's not this external thing. So the team realized, okay, it's finally time for a total rewrite. It's been a long time coming. I've personally built a lot of Symfony console apps. There's a lot of other people that have built Symfony console apps. Everything here from Composer and all these things that once you're in Drupal long enough you hear about are all built on the same components. They're all underlying, they're all Symfony, which is what Drupal 8's powered by. So there's a million examples of how to build a really powerful CLI tool that's really easy to use. So basically I've been dreaming of doing this for a long time and the opportunity arose, so I'm finally like sitting down and coding it. All the details, we're going to store the stuff in YAML files. Once we get the commands working well enough, we can put it in there with the front-end hosting system. But primarily, I needed it to be simple and easy to use and complete and do everything for you. Like the Drush commands were not easy to use at all. You need to know everything ahead of time. Basically, no one used the back-end command line for Ager. I would wager. They said it was there so you could use it, but no one actually did because it just was not easy to use. So how do we make it easy to use? Clean and simple console makes things colorful, concise, not cluttered. You just type in provision and you see the list of things that you're able to do. So it works with context. You save like the site that represents the platform represents the site you're working on. When you type in save, if you don't specify up front, it asks you for each question and generates the defaults if possible. Like I'm in this folder, so if I can just hit enter and it'll use that folder for the path to my Drupal site. So I'm trying to minimize the keystrokes that everyone has to make. We're going to do a live type through thing here, but distilling complex things down to as simple as possible when you're using it right in the terminal, right? So writing the web config, creating the database, something fails, it just throws an X. We're not going to like spit out everything unless you ask for it. Being verbose, this is what a successful verified looks like. So like all those instructions, right? Create your database and your Apache and all that. We're just running them as tasks, and it interactively shows the task, checks it if it runs successfully, puts an X if it fails. This thing has to be easy to develop. Ager was really hard to contribute to. This is just background, but that's the way it works. Is that you're storing things like your server. It represents your local computer. You know, it knows it has Apache in the database. The site is URLs. You can put as many sites on that server and platform as you can. The platform represents the code base. All this stuff is now stored in these little simple YAML files. You don't write these. Like when it's asking you those questions, you're answering them and it writes it for you automatically. But you can go in there and read it and see, okay, that's how my thing is configured. Properties like root, that's where are my Drupal files located. The make file is like the thing that is used to build your site with all the modules in it. A get URL is like where it's going to clone from. So if you put get URL in there and you verify this platform, it'll automatically clone it into that root. Right? So you don't have to do any of these manual steps. In terms of programming, interactively, it's like tells you this. This is the green down here is what you see. This is the default. If you hit enter, that's stored. And it's basically, I was able to, because it's Symfony and all these things that I'm learning about like chain methods, I can just create this very simple, okay, a platform has a root, the description is this, the default value is the current folder you're in, whether or not it's required, and then a special function to like validate that. Again, I'm going over the heads of a lot of people because this is not Drupal stuff, but all you developers out there, this is how easy this is going to be. You know I'm talking to you. Look how simple this stuff is. This is the property for get URL. I'll do it in real time, but when you type in a get URL, it then runs the validate hook, which says, can I access that get URL? And tells you, no, you cannot access. Are you sure that's the right one? You know, and so it's like you are able to get this like hand-holding through, and it's really a lot of fun. But clean in terms of programming, right? So we can walk through. It's like, if it's empty, don't do anything. Tell the user what I'm doing. I'm checking the get remote, because if it just hangs, then the user has no idea what you're doing. This is a task exec, just means run this command. Get ls remote just pings the get URL. This basically is just building a command that runs on the command line. If it was not successful, then show this message. If it was successful, then just show that message, and that's it. So if you're building DevOps tools, this is really handy stuff. Services, they represent like your web server. We're aware of your web server, what type it is, what we need to do to restart it, what the config file needs to look like, the database, all that stuff. The way this whole thing works is through a thing called verify. You insert a server and you say verify server, and the code goes, what am I supposed to do? And it looks up all these tasks, and it says, okay, I need to write a file, I need to change the permissions of this folder, all the stupid stuff that we don't care about and a robot can do better, it will do for you, and that's how Aegir works now. But it's in like all these drush execs and shell execs, and it's just this big mess of drush and functions, and it's extremely confusing. Now we have these tasks, they're little tasks, and it's like just a list. And when you saw that checkbox, that's where it's getting these strings. So it says start, and then it prints that message, and then it runs the command, and then it just prints done. It just prints done at the end with the timestamp, or you can send a failure message or all this other stuff. And that's basically, this is like 99% of DevOps is like write a file, run a command. So whether it's you're launching Kubernetes with this thing or just running Apache, it's like write a file with some data in it and run a command, and you get a website or whatever service you're running. So yeah, basically every service you have a class that just says like database service, and you have these methods for verify site, platform, and server, and so you do things when someone calls verify site or verify server, and it can be anything. Like I showed the git clone one earlier. This is the Docker build one. So this is the Docker web service that will actually build the container for you automatically. And because it's using, this is all robo stuff, which I'll get into in a minute, but it like fails gracefully and throws beautiful exceptions in color, and it's awesome stuff. And it hides all of that. See this silent here? Robo task, Docker build, right? What directory, this is all robo stuff. What tag is it going to run in, what file it's going to use, options. But the silent part here is universal for robo tasks, which will then, awesome. Yeah, so if it's not verbose, it just hides it. So if you dash V, it prints out everything. I got 5 minutes. Leverage others, robo, again. Everything in terms of DevOps is built in, it's like, what is it, Gulp or Grunt or whatever the task runner is. This is a whole new thing. Drush built on robo. All these other tools are using robo for all sorts of different things. It's got everything in it we could possibly need for moving files and doing ops type work. So we're not writing execs and running shell scripts all the time. We're just leveraging these kind of elegant object-oriented things to do stuff. We're using it as a framework. It can be put into a FAR file. This is all built by this consolidation team, which is like the Drush core maintainers got together and they're like, all this stuff we wrote for Drush is useful for other things. So like their libraries are used by WordPress CLI and all these other different tools. So this is the PHP renaissance we're all talking about, right? So these all use Robo specifically, like Acquia BLT and all these other tools. Once this thing works, we can include it in Drupal 8 itself and just use the interaction to generate a form instead. Let's do something. Let's get it working. Okay. Okay. Terminal's annoying, right? But we're going to make it easier. So Pro is my shortcut for provision. You type Pro, it tells you all the commands. If I type Pro status, it tells me just my config, but I have no context yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and start making things. Pro save, it tells me, oh, context. You could put all of these things in the command line automatically too. So if you're using it for DevOps, you can just write a single line to save your context all at once. Give it a name. I tell it what type. Oh, I want server. These autocomplete things are awesome. I can just hit one letter, or I can hit up and down, and it scrolls through. So it's super easy to use. Defaults are built in, so I'm just like hitting enter. Localhost is fine. Script user is automatically detected because of the property. He's like automatically looking up the currently running user, automatically looking at my home directory. This stuff is all just going to be, you don't even know, you're going to need to know, not even going to need to know what it is. I hit enter to save that config. I want to add a service. Yes, I do. That server has a database. It's MySQL. This is one part I have not automated yet. Work in progress. Another one, HTTP. It's basically, again, universal. So there's going to be libraries for like whatever type of system you happen to be running it on. This one for demo is running Apache. Detects the web group automatically, whether it's wdata or one of these other ones. This is going to set up local macOS built-in Apache. There's no Docker or VM that's going to happen here. It saves your restart command. That's how I can write it and restart it. No, I don't want to add another service. I'm already done. Okay, so now that I have the context, server master, see it saved everything I put into those inputs. And now I can verify the server will tell me if I actually do have a web server there. I actually put a sleep in there for 1 second. So you can see the to-do and then it runs because it goes too fast sometimes. But if it's interactive, I'm going to make it an option. But if I do -v for verbose, we'll get a lot more. So it's like checking, see if I can create the database, seeing all these things. This is just a server. I haven't added the platform yet or anything like that. So this is just making sure, okay, I can see a database. I have root access. I can create privileges. This is all, the goal of this is to create these databases automatically. Right? So now I need to add a platform. I have a demo here. Wait, yeah, let's go into this folder. So I already downloaded Atrium. So I can save a new platform. Atrium. It's a platform. It's saying my root. I want yes, and hit enter. Don't care about the makefile. Don't care about any of this stuff. So I'm just hitting enter. Hit enter again to write it. It saved it to the YAML file. It needs a web service, so now it lists the server I just added because it knows that server is providing web service to me. So I can say, yep, I want server master, and that's it. So now I can do a verifying the platform. Let's see if this works. So this just does a little Apache config. Platforms don't do much, so let's add another platform because it's fun to do this. So that's the root is where I want my Drupal files to go. I'm going to use a Git URL this time. So like if this was your Pantheon or whatever, I put it in here, it checks, it says, is it really there? It's really there, connected. Do I want to save that? Yes. Do I want to specify the web server? And now when I call verify on this platform, when it does it the first time, it'll actually clone it for me. Tells you it's creating the folder, cloning the repo to there. If I hit -v, you would see the output of the git clone and all the the downloading. So now we have 2 platforms. All right. Now it's at a site. The fun part. Sorry, save. To make an alias. New site. So each site, a site goes onto only one platform. So the site I'm creating, I'll be like, do I want it to be in Atrium? Yes. Or do I want it to be on the other platforms? I hit yes. And then I got to give it a domain. I already have this URL. Local.computer is my domain. All redirects to 127 localhost. Feel free to use it. I don't care about the profile. Atrium or Ager installs automatically, so it tracks what install profile you want to use so it can fully automate. So it'll actually run the install profile and have everything done for you. So now it's saying, okay, it's a site. The site requires a database service, so which server would you like to use for your database? I hit server master. This will be automatically generated, but it's not right now, so I'm just going to type it in so we can do it later. But it saves that data to the contacts. I can see it here. All right, so all the different metadata, what users and names it needs. Now I want to verify the site, and this should create the database, create the virtual host file. Not yet. So a couple things were mocked in there, but what Ager does is actually writes your settings.php file, so it's already ready to go, it's already configured. But I should be able to, now that this properly worked, to load that URL. Close. I remember, I think I know why. So this is good debugging demo opportunity. No, not debugging. I mean, we're going to check our metadata backend here. So everything, huh? Oh, wait. Oh. Site.local.computer is just a context name. It means nothing. The URI is what matters. So local.computer is always resolving to localhost, no matter what. Anything under local computer resolves to localhost. But yeah, anyway. This was the, I do this all in Linux. This is the yeah? What, this? Yeah, that's the name of the context. It is the URI, because I can show you this stuff here. So it all just goes to Apache configs. Right, so Apache vhost, it's right here. It should have restarted. Yes. No, it's the restart. Okay, Macs have a very strange thing. You have to put a -K in the restart command. Thank you, Frank. It's very strange. Okay, so the command is so you can see these are all the YAML files. It's trying to restart with this, which works fine. It says, yeah, it's fine, but it doesn't actually reload the config. I've learned this through debugging. This is literally built-in Mac OS Apache, so it's very obscure and weird. But if I do this -K and then do the provision verify, and I'll do the hold on, we'll do it verbose so we can see the messy version. Boom. See, that wouldn't have shown. That doesn't show up unless you use the K. How confident am I? Very confident. Overconfident. Overconfident. Anyway, right? This is very hard. This is a very hard process, but like we just want to build Drupal sites. So if we can simplify it, we can make it easier for everybody and bring more people on. Because getting on your local was really important. And I hate, poor new people have spent like 2 weeks to 3 months figuring out how to run a local host and stuff like that. So once I find my slides, I'll wrap it up. Questions? Yeah, that's next. Like I haven't gotten there with 4.x, but that's how Aegir Core works now. So you add multiple servers, and only the first one is the local one. The other servers are all somewhere else, and they only work if there's an SSH connection, and then it pushes the configs to that server, runs restart on that server.
Nice.
And that's it.
Back here. Oh, that's live. So where's the files saved, John? Are they in a YAML file, or does it read it right from?
That's YAML files. It's in a default directory, but you can change that too. So if you do, this is the console config file. Any of these can be overridden if you put it in that YAML file. I don't have one right now. This is where it's actually saving the contexts.
Nice.
This is inspired by Terminus. Terminus has a nifty class that loads in all this config easily. It automatically loads them all in from environment variables, for example, and all these other interesting things. So yeah, everything's reconfigurable from these files. Is that it?
Short question, probably long answer. Are you in a virtual environment with this?
No, this is running directly on macOS Apache. For this use case, on my Linux machine, I run Docker locally. The point is, it all comes down to Apache anyway. So I'm extracting it out where we can put it on all these different use cases. Because you're always going to want to run your website on different systems. People are going to have different, So if we can get it as simple as possible, I even have PHP run server plans in there to just use PHP run server and like SQLite, which is just a file, And so if I can get that working, you will need like 0 extra dependencies on a Mac laptop because you already have PHP, CLI, and SQLite, I believe, is built in.
Yeah, I think it comes with it.
If you install the development tool.
I found Simple Test will break PHP built in,
But yeah, the point is like run a website. All the different ways we can do it turns out are pretty simple because we have all these different classes. So like instead of Apache, it's just run this command. That's the whole thing. When it verifies the server, it executes. I'm trying to get this to run in the background and like pull it later, but it's tricky. This is kind of these tasks. It could be totally arbitrary. We can add these classes and just do all sorts of stuff. That's it. Thanks.
Woo! Thank you. Thank you, John. Are these your glasses? Yes. Oh, my glasses. Are these your glasses? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott's glasses. Woo! Yeah! Okay. Doug, do you want to come and plug yourself in while I introduce? So Doug's talk is called "Could Drupal Hold the Key That Allows Workers to Manage, Maybe Even Embrace," some mystery here, "the digital transformation upending all industries." So he's got an intro here too. Doug McCabe is an executive member of the Union Web Services Collective and president of operations since 2008. Since 2010, UWS has partnered with Communications Workers of America in New York City to pilot a joint labor management worker retraining and upskilling program. Beginning with CWA and other local union members, this program has trained approximately 100 members at various times and now developed a team of Drupal-based associates and coders. Such programs, if successful and mutually acted upon, may be key to redressing income inequality and some of the current economic and societal challenges facing our country. How to develop and train a 21st century workforce appears more and more as one unsolved riddle or piece of the puzzle. Now that was not long enough to plug in. Oh, it was. Look at that. who's long enough to plug in and make a snide comment. So perfect. That's it. So here we go. Doug, are you ready?
Absolutely. Do you mind if I just
Go for it.
How about
Yeah.
that?
All right.
All
Doug
right.
McCabe. Woo!
All right. Thank you, guys. Really, whoops, a little loud. I'm usually so loud anyway, I don't need a mic, but we'll go with it. Just thank you very much to Ho-Ling and Manny. This talk, if you will, grew out of the Drupal Camp NYC. The only difference being that tonight, instead of 60 high school students that we had kind of crash the party at Drupal Camp, we've got you all. So it's probably, it's probably more exciting then, but we'll work with it tonight. And we were, talking Kyrie Irving, and hopefully he's stomping on LeBron right now as we speak. So really, for the work that we've been doing, we wanted to give you guys a sense of it. Workforce development is something that Union Web Services, which is our firm, sort of accidentally came to. One of the, as a employer of developers and hire of developers, one of the things that we constantly ran into was, just people coming and going, changing skill sets, needing people at certain times, not needing people at certain times, having production schedules, very much like construction. We're sort of a general contractor. We build these systems, and it just seemed like over time the skill sets varied so widely in terms of the system administration and the network stuff, building the site, the front end. At the same time, we were fortunate enough to, at I guess the point of 2008, start to realize that the labor union, we're a workers collective, and that was always very important to us, those two things, to be worker owned and operated, and also to be affiliated with organized labor, since most of our clients are organized labor and some of their employers, but mostly organized labor. So originally we started out in the UE, United Electrical Workers, not the IBEW, United Electrical Workers. But the work that we were doing was kind of so, out there and digital and conceptual, and these guys were using like machinery tools in South Boston and manufacturing, which is fantastic, but they didn't really understand Drupal. They didn't really understand the kind of work we were doing, dating back to 2000, which is actually when the company started. We started off doing these very basic HTML websites for labor unions. We had no idea of the need, and that you could really run into almost any a programming task of any magnitude or complexity, because these are, after all, organizations with hundreds, if not thousands, or tens of thousands of members. So they're running these large organizations, and any developer that's worked with us, I think part of the challenge was, there would never be a task that wouldn't be complicated enough for them. So that was kind of the background for some of this stuff. Sort of as a testament to Mom and Dad, who were both reporters, I kind of attacked these things with just the 5 W's. More or less, like as we go through, you might be like, wait, you didn't get to the when, or you didn't get to the how, or whatever. But so I start with who, what, where, when, how, why. And the workforce development piece, I want to just try to identify the players in it, and then try to work in, where Drupal and where communications, Workers of America kind of have taken this. And in fact, why we're using Drupal, which I think may be more to the point, I guess. So Communications Workers of America, we, our union is 2 million strong. They're actually in all sorts of different industries. They're not just computer programmers, obviously. CWA works for, Verizon, works for Comcast, works for many of the, biggest bellwether technology companies that we've all, grown up with, come to love, and periodically hate, I guess. But also nurses, flight attendants, it's just a really big, big union. So let me keep, this is where I always get stuck, is going back and forth between the link. There we go. Okay. So let's keep moving here. Our own members and all union web services workers are members of CWA 1180 right here in New York City, in Tribeca. And that was the organization that we did sign an agreement with. So if you will, Union Web Services, we're like an affiliated contractor the way an electrical contractor is signed to an agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the way a sheet metal contractor would be signed to an agreement with the sheet metal workers. So Union Web Services would be the signatory. Let's see. And then I think it's probably important a little bit just to tell you guys about our mission. Now, I noticed when I was looking at this, we exist to promote and further the goals of the labor movement by providing 21st century technologies. We probably wrote that in like 1999. So the 21st century, we were jumping, way ahead. Now we should probably change it to 22nd or something. Including online tools that allow unions to reach their members and other constituents in the most cost-effective and direct manner possible. So I think in terms of our group, that's the main thing for us is the communications. Whether it's Drupal, whether it's some other thing, the overall goal, if it was most efficient really, to write something in 3-foot high letters on the factory wall and put it in red type, that's what we would be interested in doing. But, there's so much now digitally, if not entirely, that it certainly pushed us in that direction. But we definitely don't, kind of run to the newest app. I mean, you can imagine organized labor is not always there anyway. So, that is a challenge. That is a challenge sometimes. Let me just go back here. As far as the workforce development, and this is core to organized labor. Organized labor is really about, you have two different kinds of unions, if you've never thought about this, okay? You've got people where all the work goes through the employer. Those would be like teachers, nurses, even some doctors, state, county, municipal workers and stuff like that. But everything, if you talk to anyone who's a teacher who's maybe, I don't know, in their 20s or early 30s, some of them don't even know they're in a labor union, right? They get a statement on their paycheck from ADP, and then they just see union dues, and they have absolutely no idea what that is or where that's going because somebody signed an agreement way back when to cover the New York City teachers or to cover the nurses who work in that hospital. And it's just not anything they ever really thought about. More to the kind of our world a little bit, in the construction trades, it's very different. The work goes through the union because if you think of it, if you put up a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, that project needs to get finished. It needs, there's an imperative there whereby you really have to work with the people that have that skill or have that trade. You see me working it back a little bit, to Drupal and digital communications. So that's the fundamental difference between those two types. The primary benefits, say, that a construction union would be able to provide to the people that hire those workers would be people who are trained. And so when I say the work goes through the union, it means if you are building something, you are going to go to, you're going to have bids and all this sort of stuff. But ultimately, what the construction trades are trying to tell the developers, the general contractors, is, hey, we got you covered. And any of these structures that you see, if we're redoing the lights, if we're redoing the ducts, the heating, the ventilation, the air conditioning, what have you, if we're renovating buildings to make them more energy efficient, they are going to be, or want to be, particularly in the position of providing those workers. And so I know I'm working my way around to it, but that is really where we would like to be. Because traditionally the CWA, generally, not always, but works for employers in which the work goes through the employer. And a lot of times that's just fine. But we know that in 2016, we had about 30,000 people in the streets of Lower Manhattan, Verizon workers, because the company, wanted to cut their health benefits or reduce their pension or whatever latest thing they want to do. If the union is not controlling the work, it obviously puts them in a far inferior bargaining position. You're reliant really on bargaining at that point. So this is all why we look at workforce development. That's why it's important to us. From the union perspective, you know, the sort of stereotype, I guess, of organized labor is, well, you know, one person's gonna kind of, you know, bring this piece of furniture into the room, but he can't actually set up the mics because that's a specialized skill. So they tend to, historically, you'll see workers and, you know, their labor representatives get very protective about the work they do. But the problem is when you have this digital transformation where everything is being atomized and smashed, and you see like whole malls just disappearing, right? Like how many workers work in retail? A lot, like 15% of the workforce, right? So all that stuff being smashed by the digital transformation, you can't really kind of hang on to anything. So again, we wove that into the workforce development. We do have worked with organizations like CWE, which targets, you know, you may see some names here you recognize, but has lots and lots and lots of different New York City local labor unions. And again, the same thrust. They are like a nonprofit that works to develop the partnerships to link up, you know, the city goals in terms of hiring and retraining workers with employers, et cetera, et cetera. So this is like a whole field. It's huge. You know, we came into it like in the last 10 years. So we would be the employer in that equation. So who is generally impacted by this, you know, other than the employers who are looking for skilled labor, right? Tends to be like, particularly when you look at the federal level and the way grants are distributed from the Department of Labor, and you might have heard, you know, talk about apprenticeship. They just approved like $200 million at the federal level for apprenticeships for 2018. But in general, you know, it's workers looking to improve skills, advance in their you know, particular industries. A lot of the strategies are very industry based. You know, so the kind of thing about workforce development is the employer needs something right now, but they may not need it a year from now, so they train you in these very specific areas. And one of the things I think our instructors have really tried to do with Drupal is really extend it to, you know, broader skills. So the people, you know, that when people talk about like worker retraining, politicians are always talking about worker retraining, where will these jobs come from? Unemployed, younger workers, de-skilled or dislocated, you know, so everything we heard about in 2016, like the factory that used to be in, you know, Akron, Ohio, and it's not there, now what do you do about it? It's a societal issue, it's a problem, affects the community. What about the 1% of all Americans who are incarcerated? How are those people absorbed? What is the strategy for bringing them back into the workforce? So these are all people impacted, and certainly our communities impacted. Yeah, so this image just kind of says it all, right? Like the current moment, I think it's useful to consider like where we're at, which is like, oh my gosh, the look on her face is like, what is this? This is a tractor. Have you ever seen a tractor before? Well, no, I never, you know, I was too busy you know, whooping it up in the Hamptons or something. But you know, that, and surely that plays a part, that detachment, right? And so this was something that, you know, without getting too deep into the politics of it, contributes to the current historical moment. But there's other things that we may want to think about. So we look at like wealth inequality. You know, the Harvard Business School, even 2 or 3 years ago, was talking about unsustainable. And what they're saying, they're not saying like, oh gosh, society will be so terrible with all these unemployed people. Well, you know, okay, that's the way it goes. They're talking about the employers. If the employers don't have qualified workers, if you know, as these transformations come down, whether it's automation, artificial intelligence, whatever, where does that leave them? That's what they're considering unsustainable. And it certainly does have effect on the workers too. And then, you know, if you really want to get into the government aspect of it, you know, labor traditionally has served as a organizing vehicle for citizens, right? Because if you are in this, you know, union, or if you all work for the same company, and you have this solidarity with all the people in that company or all the people in that union, it does allow people to move as a group and impact things, you know, legislatively, politically. But if that's not there, if that vehicle is taken away and you're just individuals dealing with these massive institutions, you're going to have less and less of a voice. And that's in fact what this Princeton study found, which is that your voice pretty much corresponds to the number of, you know, your wealth, in effect. So, you know, digital transformation, toxic brew. I know I'm probably running a little short. Whoops. Let me go back here. So we got rural. Generational. I mean, all this is happening all around us. It would seem that we would pay attention to it. Racially, interesting story in the Boston Globe. I don't know if anybody saw this. But just looking at all this building and all this construction, gotta go 5 minutes, okay. Traditionally, you know, the sectors of the population that were on that slide, like dislocated workers or people who've been separated from employment or whatever. I mean, it does definitely depend or affect, you know, if you're a woman, if you're a woman of color, if you're another, you know, so-called minority, right? So thinking about that also points to, you know, maybe a different way. Now, and I'll just kind of, one last one here. The gig economy may strengthen the invisible advantage men have at work. This was an interesting one because this was a study where they took, like, how did they set it up? Like, they took a woman and a man and they switched signatures. And they're both working in technology. And they start to send emails to the clients. And then they started to print like what they were getting back in terms of the respect of the response. So when the client responding knew it was a woman emailing them, the responses were far more curt, you know, rude, outright offensive. And then when she sent emails as a man, it was like, oh yeah, you know, absolutely, we can do that, we can work together, whatever. So that was something that you heard a lot about, I think, probably in the very beginning days of open source, you know, when we were first kind of starting with the resource allocation model, open source, that this would solve all these inequalities. This would solve all these issues in our society. And clearly, you know, the gig economy and the way things are being structured increasingly with automation as well. I think this was even today, a couple days ago, workplace robots could increase inequality. So obviously the people that are programming the robots and running the robots, if that's a smaller and smaller group, you see that, you know, we'll get the same sort of results. So just before I sign off, let me tell you a little bit, if I may, about our particular program and why Drupal. I think we're, again, kind of dancing around it or whatever, touching on it. Certainly the fact that it can be in the cloud, and certainly the fact that you can use tools like Moodle to, you know, what they call blended learning, like you can have in-person instruction, you can give people, you know, tremendous amount of resources, direct them to the Drupal community. That's obviously something that's very appealing because you have this supportive community, everybody's working on, you know, projects of common interest, projects of mutual interest. This is very exciting. So just along that theme, you know, it's lower, I say lower barrier to entry. There's some education, but clearly to be a front-end Drupal developer, you know, you can take classes, you can integrate into the community, you can start to ask questions. It accommodates a range of skill levels. And it also, I think from our perspective, maybe somewhat selfishly as, you know, CWA and a CWA employer, the way it seemed to have gone over the last 3-4, you know, years, it does accommodate more and more some of the industries and the content in the industries that the CWA has been involved in, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's video, whether it's newspaper, publishing, etc. So that's why we turn to it. I just looked at this quote from Dries. The web has the power to change lives, educate the masses, create new economies, disrupt business models, and make the world smaller in the best of ways. Digital will continue to change every industry, every company, every life on the planet. And I think we see that and we just wonder, to what extent is Drupal becoming synonymous with digital? Maybe something worth thinking about. And then just as far as CWA itself, if you know anything about Bell Telephone and some of the innovation that was done at Bell Labs, the Unix project traditionally, coming way back when out of Bell Labs, Communications Workers of America has always been very closely tied to innovation. And beyond that, certainly, project management, large industrial type projects. For example, William Schuhart, who was one of the original engineers in the Bell Labs and worked there for 40 years, essentially laid the groundwork for quality control, essentially laid the groundwork for statistical quality control. Whatever the communication medium was, the CWA has always been at the forefront of it. And certainly providing a skilled workforce that can build, maintain, and work with whatever the communication medium is. That's what we're all about. So applicants in our program who do well, I think it's maybe a little bit different than the average quote-unquote coder, boot camp program. Everybody pretty much has professional experience, so we're not necessarily haven't worked with a lot of people that were incarcerated or unemployed for long periods of time, and that probably skews our numbers a little bit. They do perform well. We have an initial assessment that we can bring people in who have absolutely no coding or Drupal background. We have an initial assessment. If they do well on that, they tend to do very well in the class. The other kind of thing that as these different boot camps or whatever, you start to read different things about them, they've promised a lot of things, and a lot of them are just not around. And I believe that's primarily because they're focused on the revenues they get from the program. So affordability is absolutely key to what we're doing in terms of retraining our workers, because retraining our workers is absolutely imperative. But you'll see this, you'll go out there, you'll see glossy websites, and they'll, in the fine print, say, well, it's $20,000 for the boot camp, and we're going to eliminate 95% of the applicants up front. So I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions about that. So we're really focused on my last slide, guys, in the PowerPoint. It's salmon-colored PowerPoint, no less. Check that out. So if you didn't get enough salmon for Christmas or New Year's, by all means. But these are like the principles we work off of. We want to build a bridge to people that traditionally have not been exposed to Drupal or coding or open source technologies. Make common cause with other organizations that need that skilled workforce, whether they're end users of it or people that are going to hire developers for their own customers. And then a big part of it is any apprentice that works with us is actually earning while they learn, very similar to the construction trades. And I do think that with organized labor, you do have this, with our members, the potential for mentorship. So you've got a lot of people that are at generationally different ends of the workforce, but people that have been in those professional positions for long periods of time. If you think about absorbing other people into apprenticeship, and maybe, let's not say Drupal apprenticeship, but a coding apprenticeship or what have you, they could certainly benefit from being around those older workers. So that's what we had for you. Any questions? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Please.
This was very interesting. So my first question is, I've met women who work as security guards who've told me, women, you will never see a female in a building workers union. Those jobs for doormen and porters are always. I have yet to see a single female. So there are clear gender issues. So portraying the unions as these wonderful angelic entities, I think, is leaving out quite a bit of the story. And New York City police are unionized, and the news recently reported a teenage female was consecutively raped by 2 policemen while she was handcuffed in the van, and then she was visited in the hospital by 8 or 9 members of this wonderful police union to try and sway her from reporting this. So I think you've left out a bit of the story here.
Okay. Did you have other questions, or was
Well,
it?
would you like to
I
comment
can
on
comment
the
on that.
gender composition
Absolutely.
of your union and
no,
your
it's a
thoughts
great-
about New York City police and the recent issues?
I think other people probably are more qualified to comment on the New York City police than I would be. But in terms of gender issues, and I would also say racial issues, yes, that is an excellent point. Labor has been, in a way, one could say, cut off its nose at times, despite its face. There have been traditionally people that were excluded from unions. The James Baldwin movie, I'm Not Your Negro, he talks about it. He's like, I can't be in your unions. I can't be, I can't be in the same neighborhoods. So they are certainly not. It was not my intention to present labor. And again, we're on the employer side, so we have that affiliation. But it was not my intention to say that, like any organization, whether it's a company or a union that has people, there's going to be a mix, and there certainly is institutional racism and sexism. Probably in most of them. I'm sure you could come up with all sorts of examples.
I can only talk to about the CWA classes, and they're very well balanced. So Doug has no control over the police union or the other unions that are out there. But I know it's racially diverse and diverse by gender. And I think the important part of that is you get a better product at the end of the day, rather than just having white middle-class males do the programming. That's how you begin to shut a computer off by clicking the start button.
Yeah, it's a very important point. Thanks, Scott. CWA 1180, I don't have the exact figures, but I would guess that maybe 50% or 60% of the members would be women of color, or people of color. Maybe a smaller percentage would be female, but many. We're mostly, I think we're majority female. I would think I'm safe ground saying that. But if you need the numbers, we'll get them for you. Other questions on this very interesting topic that we're blessed to work with? And thank you to Scott, and Ruthie actually is also an instructor, so thank you to all the CWA folks that showed up tonight. And students, of course. And thanks, Alex, and thanks, Jolene, and Manny. Take care.
All right, thank you, everybody. So while that was going on, all of your employers called and said there's a snow day tomorrow for every one of you in this room. Just so you know. All right, well done. Well done. Now, okay, we're gonna hold on. Can someone switch can you switch the input in the back to? There we go. We got it. Awesome. Let me just get my little clicker here. I will. Will the owner of the following scarf please stand up? There he is, ladies and gentlemen. All right, give him a hand. Give him a hand. Okay. Okay. Here we go. The next meetup, we're going to have another meetup. Our meetups are the first Wednesday of the month. It should be right here in this room, February 7th of this year, 2018. It will be our second meetup this year. Excuse me, if you, like we said before, if you have a topic you want to talk about, something you want to hear about, please do let us know. And we seem to have lost the Slack slide. I don't know where that one went, but we have a Slack channel. For those of you who don't know, we have a Slack channel. Come find one of the organizers and we'll tell you how to get on the Slack channel. So you can, that's another way to get a hold of the organizers and say, I want to do a talk on blah. Afterparty, Bill's Bar and Burger, downstairs, 16 West 51st Street. It's right downstairs on 51st Street. Come and you can finish, remember the introductions you did like 16 hours ago? And I stopped you in the middle of a sentence? You can finish the sentence downstairs at Bill's Bar and Burger. Okay. Sponsored by our good friends at Fastly. I thought there's one more slide. There's not. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our organizers. Yay! Everybody in this room needs to bring 2 friends to the next meetup in February. Cool. Okay. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Go.